Thanks for joining me. We're going to be talking about Drupal 8 end of life, and if this date is giving you some trepidation, it should, because we are less than a month away from Drupal 8 officially going end of life. If you don't know me, hi everybody. I'm Mike Madison. I'm a senior manager on Acqui's professional services team. Here's some contact info for me. And I have done quite a few Drupal 9 upgrades over the last year and a half. I've also done a couple very public-facing ones for the Drupal GovCon and Drupal for Gov sites. So I have some examples to share with you. We're just going to talk today not so much about all of the possible things that you could do. Today, the goal is to really focus in on what you should be doing right now to get off of Drupal 8 and to try and give you some advice to walk out of this session and go immediately start working on that. I'm a big fan of ad hoc questions, so please use the chat or the QA tab. I will be watching both throughout the session. If you have a question, please ask. I will go into more detail if I can. So our agenda for the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to talk about where we're at today, stuff you should be doing right now. Before the week is out, if possible, what you should do from there, and things you can do to help make sure that it goes smoothly. And then a section I'm calling Let's Never Do This Again, because I'd like to make sure that when Drupal 9 goes end of life in a couple of years, we're not coming perhaps quite down to the wire like we are today. So we have reached the end of the road. Cue the boys to boys to men song. Cue all of the Lord of the Rings memes you'd like. We are at the end of Drupal 8. But what does that mean in practice? That does mean, unfortunately, that your site will lose security coverage on November 2nd, so in just a couple of short weeks. But I do want to be really transparent with you, right? That doesn't mean that your site's going to stop working, right? It's not like the fears of Y2K, if you are old enough like me to remember all that. Your site is not suddenly going to shut down and pack itself in 2 weeks. I would also go so far as to say that you would not be in imminent danger on the 2nd. Assuming you're running the most up-to-date version today of Drupal 8.9. If you're running older versions of Drupal, you're already in danger, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. But be aware that as of the 2nd, that means that if a critical security vulnerability is discovered in something on the 2nd, you will not get a lifeline from the Drupal community. So if CK Editor or Symfony or Twig or whatever, pick your underlying dependency, has a critical exploit discovered, the Drupal team will fix that. The Drupal security team will fix that in Drupal 9. They will not fix it in Drupal 8. And every one of those that is discovered, every one of those that racks up, your website is going to get less and less and less and less secure over time. And to the best of my knowledge, I could be mistaken, but to the best of my knowledge, no hosting providers are offering expanded coverage on Drupal 8 as they are with Drupal 7, right? Like with Drupal 7, when Drupal 7 goes end of life next year, November 2022, a number of premier hosting partners, Acqui included, will allow you to pay them for ongoing Drupal 7 support and security coverage, even though the community will stop. But to the best of my knowledge, nobody's doing that with Drupal 8. And a lot of that has to do with Symfony. Drupal 8 is going end of life now because Symfony 3, I think, is going end of life. So we are doing this because Symfony is doing this. So there you go. Now, a thing I want to point out that as of today in the Drupal community, the Drupal core maintainers and security team on the bug fix side, if you're running Drupal 9.2, 8.9, or 7, you're going to be getting bug fix releases. So I believe Drupal 9.2.7 came out last week, something like that, and I think that was a bug fix release. And if you're running Drupal 9.2, 9.1, 8.9, or 7, you're going to be getting security releases. If you're running Drupal 9.0 or if you're running Drupal 8.8 or older, you already don't have security coverage. And in fact, if you're running Drupal 9.1 or any of those other ones that I just mentioned, you're already out of bug fix. So in some ways, the Drupal 8 end of life, you're already operating much in the same zone, right? You already don't have security coverage from the community. Um, I would not say that should make you feel better about your situation. Not having security coverage is a big deal, particularly on government sites. But I would say that again, like the whole notion here is like there is not some magic switch on November 2nd that is going to change your circumstance, especially if you're already running an older version of Drupal. You're already in a bad way. Um, November 2nd is not going to make it worse for you. If you're running Drupal 8.9, um, yeah, November 2nd is is going to make it worse for you. So my hope is that this talk and some of the stuff we're talking about here today will equip you to start getting yourself out of the hole that you're in, and hopefully help you get to a state where you back in both bug and security coverage land. Because there's immense power in the Drupal community when it comes to resolving problems with Drupal sites, and obviously you being up to date and in a position where you can receive those updates uh, is a very good thing. So let's talk about stuff you should be doing right now, like immediately. So the first thing I would recommend that you do is be proactive with your code base. Don't be like Sylvester there and hide under a pillow, take a nap, whatever. Um, if you haven't done this already, I strongly, strongly, strongly urge you to get out there and run the upgrade status module on your code base or code bases to understand the state of things, right? This is going to give you some really critical information like what contributed projects are you running that need to be updated into what contributed projects are you running that are not supported at all, meaning that they're not going to work and they need to go away. They would be a blocker. And what custom code do you have, if any, that would contain deprecated code that would block you from doing the update? And I also want to just point out, if you're not already running Drupal 8.8 or 8.9, running upgrade status will be good, but running upgrade status is not going to paint a complete picture because there were still things being deprecated into 8.8 at least. I don't think anything new was deprecated in 8.9. Um, but if you're running Drupal 8.6 and you run upgrade status, you will find different things when you run upgrade status again on an 8.8 or an 8.9 site because, again, additional things were deprecated in 8.7 and 8.8. So in the most ideal world, you would upgrade your site to either 8.8 or ideally the bleeding edge of 8.9, and then run upgrade status. But again, we're talking about expediency here. I want you to run upgrade status as quickly as possible. If you're not familiar with upgrade status, and I actually have a live look into the GovCon site here, so I will call out, we're already running Drupal 9 on the GovCon site, so you're going to see Drupal 9 on your Drupal 8 site. This is Drupal 10 because it's already a Drupal 9 site. What upgrade status is going to do is it's going to look at all of the different modules you have installed that are contributed or custom, and it's essentially going to tell you whether or not that module is compatible or not. Now you can see here I've got a ton of incompatibility, but keep in mind that's a ton of incompatibility with Drupal 10. It's going to be a little different for you looking at a Drupal 8 site, getting ready for Drupal 9. But the bottom line is you need to go through literally every piece of code on your site, which is not a fun process. And again, this is why upgrade status is so, so critical. And it's going to tell you uh, if that module, if that theme, if that profile, contributor, customer, or otherwise, is ready for Drupal 9. And if it's not compatible, it's going to give you a list of problems and or a list of issues that you need to resolve to get over the hump to where you need to be. There are other tools out there. Upgrade status, I think, is very cool. But there's also Drupal check, which is an open source command line tool, which is really slick. Upgrade status actually uses Drupal check. Um, Anywho, and from chat, yes, it is correct. Upgrade status will not tell you everything. We're going to talk about that. Let's put a pin in that. But upgrade status is where you should get started. And again, it's going to help you understand the state of things. And from there, once you've got that upgrade status report, what you really want to do is start doing a triage of your contributed projects. If upgrade status is telling you that you're using a contrib module that is not Drupal 9 compatible, I would treat this as a massive red flag. And the reason for that is, remember, Drupal 9 at this point has been out for like a year and a half almost. So there's a really good chance that if you have a module or several modules in your code base that are telling you they're not Drupal 9 compatible, there is no Drupal 9 compatible version, that's usually an indicator at this point in the game that there's not going to be. So, go out to Drupal.org, look at the project information. Is it an unsupported project? Is it a minimally maintained project? Is it a sandbox project? No shade on any of those states. They're all perfectly valid states, but there's a really high probability that you're going to need to abandon that module and either replace it or just remove it. And again, we'll talk more about that in a sec. Thankfully, the vast majority of Drupal modules at this point, the deprecation status tool that Acquia provides scanned something like 10,000, almost 11,000 modules. You can see well over half of them are explicitly Drupal 9 compatible. Even more of them have very minor, like info YAML or composer.json issues. So, 75%, that's what, 7,500 roughly modules out there from the ecosystem are Drupal 9 compatible. So the vast majority of those are going to be. But if you have some, shall we say, bespoke modules that are very specific for certain certain features or functionalities, it is possible that you would have a couple of modules floating around in your code base that are not Drupal 9 ready. But if you're talking about things like Google Analytics, Google Tag Manager, diff, pick your favorite modules, admin toolbar, etc., some of the most popular ones out there, those things have all been compatible since before Drupal 9 came out, and they continue to be today. So most big stuff out there is going to be okay. But again, the name of the game here is finding the things that aren't okay, because those are the ones that are going to block you. So if you do have incompatible modules, what you kind of need to start thinking about is there an alternative in the community? So one of the examples I like to give, I upgraded the Drupal for Gov website very early in the Drupal 9 release cycle. I did that as a proof of concept. We did the Drupal GovCon site later in the release cycle because I didn't want to do it in the middle of the conference last year. But with Drupal for Gov, something we ran into was that the XML sitemap module was not ready for Drupal 9 at the time. Now it is today, so thank you to the maintainers of that module. But at the time last year, it was not Drupal 9 compatible. So in that case, that would be the first bullet here. We actually uninstalled XML sitemap from the Drupal for Gov site, and we switched to the simple sitemap module because at that time it was Drupal 9 compatible. If there's not an alternative, and that was a very easy alternative for me, you've got to ask yourself, do I still need this functionality, right? So if you do have a fairly bespoke module that's doing some super awesome thing, but it's not Drupal 9 compatible, we now have a bit of a challenging situation, right? Could you rebuild or re-engineer the solution to work without that contributed project? Could you build it custom? Could you work around it? Or could you potentially take on the ownership and the maintenance of that contributed project and then do the Drupal 9 upgrade yourself? I don't know. I would say taking over a contributed project is no small feat. But look, if you have to pick between shutting down a piece of your site entirely to upgrade to Drupal 9 and continue on the security coverage, or staying on an insecure version of Drupal and keeping that super cool feature, uh, you should shut down the super cool feature and upgrade to Drupal 9, obviously, right? Because having an insecure site, having a site that does not have security coverage, uh, sooner or later, you could very well have a hacked website. And it doesn't matter how cool it is if it is defaced and out of your control. So again, the goal of this, when I use the word triage, I'm not using that word lightly. We're trying to unblock your ability to upgrade, and that could very well mean that you have to cut some things out if they're blocking the upgrade. And again, remember at this point, we're just talking about triage. I'm not saying you have to go do all this work right now. I'm not saying once you find a module that's a blocker, you have to go rewrite that module or replace that module or whatnot. What I'm saying is look at your upgrade status list, find all the stuff that's incompatible, and sort of work through piece by piece by piece and figure out, okay, this module's incompatible. Can we upgrade it? If no, is there an alternative? If no, do we really still need it? If no, get rid of it. If yes, crap, now what are we going to do? Right? You're going to need to do that for everything that is incompatible. The next step is to actually begin triage of your custom code. Same sort of deal. You don't actually have to fix all this stuff, but this is one of my common examples. I pulled it out of the Google Analytics modules uh, issue queue from some time ago. This stuff's all been fixed at this point, but this is the type of thing that you're going to find, right? Like in Drupal 8.6, the string length function was deprecated, so that means up through Drupal 8.9 you can continue to use the string length method, but as of Drupal 9 you have to switch over to this MB string length. In Drupal 8.7, the file prepare directory method was deprecated. And as of Drupal 9, that'll go away, and you need to be using Drupal core file system interface prepare directory, and so on and so forth. It's going to tell you for every single thing in your custom code that it finds what you need to do about it. Some of these are going to be a very straightforward search and replace, right? So like in Drupal 8.0, right as Drupal 8 came out, the entity manager, this is one of my favorite examples, entity manager was deprecated and replaced with entity type manager. And this is literally a search and replace, right? Like you can go through and use entity type manager exactly the same way that you used entity manager. And I mean, it's almost brainless at that point, right? You need to do a search for every place or go to every place that upgrade status found entity manager, update your use statement, update your code to reference entity type manager, boom, you're done, move on with your life. But not all of it's going to be just a search and replace, right? So there are going to be times when you have to do something a little bit more in depth. And some of these methods are not an exact one-to-one replacement. So you may have to refactor or recode. You may have to introduce dependency injection into some custom code that maybe you weren't using before. So just be aware some of it is going to be easier than others. But again, at this point, we're just doing triage. I'm not saying you need to go fix all this stuff. What we're doing is we're trying to get a lay of the land and understand uh, where are you blocked from doing that Drupal 9 upgrade. And to give you a status check at this point, like running upgrade status on a site, this is something I would imagine within a couple of hours, you should be able to get upgrade status added, run the reports, which do take a bit, and then go through sort of issue by issue by issue to figure out, like, okay, where are we at? How are we going to get there? What do we need to do? Let's figure out this triage. Um, and again, I would guess within a few hours, maybe a day, you should be able to have a pretty clear path forward for every blocking issue that you find using upgrade status. The disclaimer I want to give you here is that there's so much talk. You hear Dries talk about, you hear a ton of people talk about in the community that the Drupal 9 upgrade is the easiest Drupal 9 upgrade ever in the Drupal community, and that's true. It is, but the benchmark that we're using for that statement is totally rebuilding your website. Okay, so this process that I'm talking about is very easy. It's very straightforward. Um, but does that mean all of it's going to be simple? No. Does that mean that you can do it lightning fast? No. Does that mean you can do it blindly without testing? No. So keep in mind, this is awesome. This is so much progress. I'm so excited that we are where we are, and I'm so thankful to the core maintainers and contributors for building in an upgrade path from Drupal 8 to Drupal 9, and from Drupal 9 to Drupal 10. It's going to make life so much easier. But it does still take some time and energy and effort, and it is something that you should be doing right now if you haven't already, because again, we are very nearly out of road. So let's talk about what to do from there. Hopefully, again, within a few hours, within a day, you should have a pretty clear indicator of what is blocking you from upgrading to Drupal 9. And by the way, the answer may be nothing is blocking you from Drupal 9. In that case, just go. Don't stop. Don't pass go. Just get it upgraded. Get it done. Before you actually start remediating what you found during your triage activity, the first thing I want to make sure you have is a very solid understanding of your site. So, what I mean by that is, how does it look right now? Um, what does it do right now? Uh, is there anything that's already broken or not working? And the reason I'm asking you these questions uh, is for this most important concept, right? Like, if you're going to do a major version upgrade of Drupal, uh, how do you know if you succeeded? How do you know if you broke anything? How do you know if the state of the website on the other side of that update is where you want it to be? Versus, how do you know if the state on the other side of that website, that upgrade is something you need to roll back and abandon, right? For some people, this could be a fairly robust automated testing suite. For some people, this could be manual testing, manual review. But again, at the end of the day, before you start refactoring deprecated code, before you start updating a bunch of contributed modules, before you update Drupal itself, make sure you can find your way back to know for sure that things are working or not. So yeah, make sure you know, because again, there's no reason to do this upgrade, security or otherwise, if you break your website. I would also strongly urge you to make sure you're using the right tools before you dig into this upgrade. Because if you're using something like Sublime Text or Text Editor, Text Wrangler, or pick your text editor of choice, you can look right at deprecated code and not know it's deprecated. That's a problem. Whereas if you're using something like PHP Storm or an IDE that's actually going to scan and do code completion and so on and so forth, PHP Storm will actually tell you immediately if you're using something that's deprecated. Like, I can just scroll through a PHP file or a module file or whatnot and see that I'm using a deprecated method. So make sure you're using the right tools. It will make your life a lot easier. And whatever you do, don't make it worse, right? So in the next couple of weeks or however long that you're working on this update, um, don't write additional code that is deprecated. And that may go without saying, but I did do some work for a customer some years back where I went through, this was probably in 2019, the year before Drupal 9 came out. I went through and remediated all the deprecated code in their code base. And then a month later, we found more deprecated code in their code base. And the reason for that was uh, once we fixed it, people stopped paying attention to it. So as additional development happened, developers put additional deprecated code back into the code base, and we had to go back and remediate it again. So just, this is a process. Getting to Drupal 9 may take you a little bit. Just make sure that whatever you're doing in the intervening space does not add modules that are not explicitly Drupal 9 compatible. Don't add custom code that is deprecated, etc. Right? Don't make it worse. Okay, so the first thing that you can do safely, and the easiest thing you can do, is deal with contributed module updates. And again, the vast majority of contrib at this point is already Drupal 9 compatible, and frequently all you have to do is update. So like Devel, for instance, I think when I updated both GovCon and Drupal for Gov, we were running Devel 2.x, which isn't Drupal 9 compatible, or it wasn't, but Devel 4.x is. Similar with the Google Analytics module. I think we were running Google Analytics 2.x and we had to upgrade into Google Analytics 3.x. So, again, many Drupal 9 compatibility issues are a simple composer update command away. Just make sure you check your composer file, your composer.json file, for very restrictive versioning. Because if you have, again, if you've pinned into the 2.x version of Devel and you run composer update, um, you won't automatically upgrade into Devel 4.x. So you may need to tweak your composer settings as well as run an update. But again, you should know where you're at and where you're going, and just watch your composer output when you run your update to make sure that you get there. Again, a significant amount of the blockers that you likely have on your platform for Drupal 9, you should be able to resolve just by updating to newer versions of the contrib modules, themes, profiles, etc. Um, in terms of your custom code, again, think about the low-hanging fruit. A significant quantity of the deprecations that are happening, as I said earlier, are just a simple search and replace. So you should be able to use upgrade status to find the problems, use the deprecation info that upgrade status provides, and literally look through your custom modules, look for all uses of a particular function or method, and replace it and update it. Again, this should be very quick, very easy. And there's also a tool out there called Drupal Rector that can help automate some of this as well if you have trouble doing it yourself. The next part may be more challenging than the first two. And it could very well be, by the way, that everything on your platform is low-hanging fruit. Updating a few contrib modules, doing a few search and replaces. You may be ready to upgrade to Drupal 9. Cool, virtual high five, go for it. Uh, you may also now have significant refactoring to do. Again, as we talked about during triage, you may have to extricate some functions out of your site or some functionality out of your site if there's no replacement for that module. You may have to dig in and roll up your sleeves and take over a contributed module and get it ready for Drupal 9, which could be significant, right? I don't expect the refactoring and rebuilding to be fast, depending on what it is. But get the easy stuff out of the way first, then get into the more significant stuff. Regardless, as you're doing these updates, make sure you're testing. If you have continuous integration, if you have automated tests, make sure those are running. If you don't, you should. Do whatever manual testing you can to make sure that these things are working. Remember, if you're doing significant updates of contributed modules, there's almost certainly going to be database updates. There's probably going to be configuration updates. Make sure you take those things into consideration as you're doing all these. You may want to do small batches of updates to test and validate instead of trying to update 50 modules all at once and realize, oh no, my site doesn't work, but not having any idea which of the 50 modules broke it. And as was pointed out in chat, upgrade status can and will miss things. This happened on the GovCon site. We did the Drupal 9 update last September, last October. It was right after GovCon. And we had a problem on, I believe this was explicitly on like the user profile page. That's why we missed it in our initial testing. The homepage was working, most of the site was working, but we had an issue on part of the site. And the reason for that was literally one character. This path.alias underscore manager, sorry, two characters, changed to be path underscore alias dot manager. So the underscore and the dot flip-flopped. And in Drupal 8, because this was deprecated, it was still there and it worked. And as soon as we upgraded to Drupal 9, the path.alias underscore manager code went away, and this page started throwing a fatal error. And if you look at the changelog for it, here it is. This got deprecated in Drupal 8.8, and upgrade status missed it. And upgrade status does tend to miss things when you're doing a /Drupal service call. If I would have had a use statement and actually been doing a more proper instantiation of this service, or dependency injecting it in a class or something like that, upgrade status would have found it. But because I just did /Drupal service, it missed it. So just be aware, depending on how you're writing code and where you're writing code, upgrade status is not going to catch everything, which again is why doing manual testing and going through and confirming that everything is still working on the other side is so, so critical. Now, let's talk about the future. Let's never do this again. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that these stats are from just a couple of days ago. And if you look at these numbers, particularly the Drupal 8 numbers, a very, very hefty percentage of the community is still running Drupal 8. Obviously, we still have a ton of people running Drupal 7, but these numbers, I think, are roughly 26% of reported installs a month away from our end of life date. 26% of reported installs are on Drupal 8. Only 15% are on Drupal 9, right? And this scares me a lot. And the reason I say that is even though we see, and again, these numbers, you always have to take these numbers with a grain of salt because it's reported installs. But, even though we are seeing some progress in September, 95, 87, 78, 75, like we're moving in the right direction, we're not making massive jumps to get there. And the reason we're doing this talk today, and the reason there's 37 of us in this room, is obviously there's a pretty large contingent of the Drupal community that are still running Drupal 8 and are coming to this end of road sign with just a few weeks left to go. And what I really would like to encourage all of you to do coming out of this talk today, coming out of this conference today, is to try and put yourselves in a position to avoid this next time, right? Drupal 9 is going to go end of life sometime in the next year or two. I don't remember off the top of my head when it is scheduled. I don't know if they've, one second. I don't know if they've announced the Drupal 9 end of life. I think it's November 2023, so 2 years from now. But look at Drupal has a minor version, so 8.5, 8.6, 8.7, 8.9, 9, it's and then a major release, but a minor version release roughly every 6 months. You can pretty much bank that there's going to be a bug fix or security release at least once or twice a month, every month. And I think if we as a community can do a better job of shifting our behaviors to um, getting these updates in place more frequently, hopefully when Drupal 10 rolls around next summer, when Drupal 9 goes end of life in 2 years, we're not going to have the same conversation again, right? I don't want to have to change the slides in this deck in 2 years and do the exact same talk about the end of Drupal 9. Because theoretically, as this release cadence is happening and as these updates are happening and as the community is doing all of the stuff the community's doing, all of us as site owners and maintainers and architects and developers and whatever your title is, we should all be taking those updates and applying them to our websites as quickly as possible. In a most ideal state, you should be doing at least one update of Drupal every month. And that's probably not even enough realistically, because again, there's a bug fix and a security update once a month. But at the very least, if you're doing one Drupal update a month, you're at least staying current with the security updates. So if you're doing one Drupal update a month, and if you're in this perpetual cycle of doing updates, not only are you doing smaller updates, right? You're not doing these big jumps from Drupal 8.4 to 9.3. That's massive, right? That's years of changes. If you're going from 9.3 to 9.3.1 to 9.3.2 to 9.3.3, very small changes happening at each point. Much easier to test, much easier to validate, much easier and faster to do. And you're never going to be in this circumstance where the road is ending and you're trying to slam on the brakes to figure out, okay, can we get this update done before we run out of road? Should we keep driving past the end of the road? Should we roll out of the car? Like, what do we do when the security coverage ends? So Drupal 10 is currently slated to release in June of 2022. And I actually did a talk very similar to this one, a Drupal for Gov webinar earlier this year. If you weren't able to see that, I would definitely check it out. But the challenge I would give all of you, and again, I know this is a Drupal 8 talk, but the challenge I would give all of you is to try and position yourself, not just to get to Drupal 9, but to be ready for Drupal 10 when it comes out in June. I maintain the GovCon site more or less by myself in terms of security updates. We have a team that helps with content and front end and all kinds of other critical stuff. But there are basically one or two of us that do all of the security patching and other updates for the GovCon site. And it's a volunteer thing. We do it kind of on the side, and either Carl does an update when I'm unavailable, or I do it myself. And those are done within a day or two of them coming out. It's very possible, even with small teams on public facing sites, to stay current. And the more behind you get and the farther behind you get and the more updates you have in front of you, the harder it is to do those updates and the longer they take. So the fewer you do, so the farther behind you get. And it's this just really depressing self-defeating cycle. So my challenge to you, after you clear this immediate hurdle, after you do what we've talked about in the next few days and the next few weeks to get to Drupal 9, is do everything in your power to be ready for Drupal 10. And when Drupal 10 comes out in June, start getting into this cycle of at least doing one deployment a month, one update a month. That way, when Drupal 10.1 and 10.2 and whatever else comes out, you're already on it, you're already ready to go. And when things do go end of life, you're current. You're already out there running with the pack. You're out there getting all the good stuff. You're getting the security coverage, you're getting the bug coverage, and you're getting those updates that you so desperately want to have and need in your site. And at that point, the end of life is a blip on the radar, right? Because if you're not running, like for me, I don't have any Drupal 8 sites that I'm running right now. I'm actually getting ready to help a customer do some Drupal 8 end of life remediation, probably after it's already gone end of life. So that's cool. Um, but for me personally, in my like sphere of influence with what I've got on my plate right now in terms of builds that I'm doing for Acquia customers and for community projects and personal stuff that I'm maintaining, I don't have anything running Drupal 8 anymore. So it is the end of the road. It is a little emotional and a little sad that it's happening in a couple weeks, but it's just a blip. It's just a date for me. I don't have any angst and anxiety because none of my sites are going to be impacted by that. And I so desperately want that for all of you as well, to make sure that you're ready to go. So, as I said, we're at the end. It's been a wild ride these past 5.5, 6 years, but here we are, and hopefully, what we talked about today will help get you to the end of your Drupal 8 experience and into Drupal 9 safely. A couple of quick things, and then we'll take some questions. My team at Acquia is currently hiring. We're on the prowl for a technical architect, Drupal developer, technical account manager. You can reach out to Anthony, who is our recruiter for these roles directly, or check out our careers page on acquia.com. If you're in the market or thinking about a change, please check us out. If you enjoyed this talk, I have one more tomorrow with my colleague Ron Northcutt. We'll be talking about the Acquia Lightning end of life. And definitely check that one out tomorrow if you're using Lightning. And I had a couple of other talks earlier this week. Those recordings will be up on the Drupal for Gov YouTube in the not too distant future. And as I said up front, please do stay in touch. You can see my Twitter, LinkedIn, and blog. I have a ton of articles out there on doing the Drupal 9 upgrade, some deep dives into the GovCon and Drupal for Gov upgrade processes, and so on. And let's do some questions with our first or our last few minutes here. Fabian says, I feel like Drupal had a very short life. Compared to Drupal 7, it did. It's been 5 years. But remember, Drupal 9 is going to have an even shorter lifespan. Drupal 9 is going to ultimately only have a 3 to 4 year lifespan. And Drupal 10 will be coming out about 2 years after Drupal 9 released. And I think we're going to see these lifespans get a little bit shorter because, again, theoretically, with the major versions and the minor versions and the release cadence that we're doing in the community now, these upgrades should be a much smaller, much easier deal. But you're not wrong. It is a very short lifespan, especially compared to Drupal 7. I feel like Drupal 7 is the Windows XP of the Drupal community. Like it's been around forever, and it's going to be around for a while longer. So it has a very long lifespan. I would not expect us to see another Drupal version with that longevity. Bernardo asks, how can we ease the CK Editor 5 transition on Drupal 10? Should we worry? Should we not? I don't know enough about what's happening with CK Editor 5. I thought I saw something, and maybe I'm mistaken, but I thought I saw something in the roadmap for Drupal 9 actually with CK Editor. So there may be some upgrades being done for Drupal 9 even before Drupal 10 comes out. Um, so yeah, I'm just reading here quickly. So the target release date for Drupal 10, we plan to add CK Editor integration to Drupal 9 even sooner though. Now this article I'm looking at on Drupal.org is from earlier this year, from March, but Gabor was talking about that. Um, So might be worth asking. Looks like there's a CK Editor 5 channel in the Drupal Slack. I'm sure there are folks there that are working on it that know a heck of a lot more about it than I do. But something I found with Drupal core updates, major updates to packages and libraries, it is much less painful than it was back in the Drupal 7 world to try and do an update. The core maintainers and contributors have done a really fantastic job anticipating how many of these updates will impact you. And I have a strong degree of confidence that CK Editor 5 will probably be different and better and changed, but also not too painful of an upgrade. What other questions do all of you have? Feel free to either use the chat or the QA tab. I'm watching both. I heard in Drupal 10 they were trying to get rid of hooks. I haven't heard too much about that. I imagine that would not happen overnight rather. But I mean, think about it. Drupal 8 did get rid of a lot of hooks. A lot of the things that were hooks in Drupal 7 got integrated into other parts of the code base. And I think almost universally, getting rid of the info hooks and using YAML, and getting rid of a lot of the functionality that they did, and transitioning it into a more object oriented approach. I think I can't think of an instance where I missed the hook that they got rid of. So, granted, event subscribers and some of the things that are more Symfony-esque than early Drupal-esque, uh, they can be a little bit more challenging to grok and work with. Um, but I think the Drupal code base is in a far superior state today than it was a decade ago when I, was kind of getting into it. But I had not heard specifically that they were looking to get rid of hooks. Any other questions before we wrap up? Yeah, David, that's a great question about automated updates. I honestly don't know. Um, Solid maybe. Um, I have not been following along too much with the automated updates initiative. I know they're working hard on it, but yeah, I don't know anything. Um, I don't know anything about it. So. All right, folks. Well, hey, I really appreciate the 30 plus of you that joined. I hope you're having a wonderful time at GovCon. Don't forget, full day of material tomorrow as well. But I hope you all have a great rest of your Thursday, and we'll catch you later. Bye bye.